Welcome to the third video of the step-by-step series about using MFis to draw a bond wire layout for a power module. In this video it is about using object snaps for precise positioning of any objects, or for instance bond wires. What you see here is the file as we had it after the last video. In case you didn't follow our last video, go to our webpage, and at the place where you find this video you also find a file that you can open, and then you are also at the same place as I'm now. Okay, so first of all we want to practice a little bit, so we create a new layer where all the objects we create go into. I call it snapping tests. And I make it the current layer, so new objects go into here. Now let's check the settings. The grid snap, this is what is by default turned on. So I select a tool, line tool for instance, which needs a point as input, and then you see the point snaps to the grid. So you can also turn it off, and for now we don't need grid snap because we usually want to snap two objects, and you clearly see then better, okay, now it's snapping to an object. Okay, then project is turned off. We'll see later what this means. Then orthogonal, so now you can draw a line in all directions, and you can restrict it to the orthogonal directions like this. You can also always change the behavior by holding the shift key. If you are in orthogonal mode, when you hold the shift key you can still go in all directions. This I typically have turned on because most of the time I want to be in orthogonal direction. Planar I never use, it's always turned off in my case. Object snapping is what we want. We can also disable it or enable it. Smart track, by default in Rhino it's turned on. I typically don't use it. In some situations it's useful. I can show you smart track. For instance, we can draw a line. We can activate this point and then snap to the intersections of these two orthogonal lines and construct from here something. This might be quite useful, but it's also a little bit difficult to understand, a little bit disturbing and unpredictable, so in my case I turn it off and only turn it on when I really want to use it. Okay, these about the settings. Let's now go and have a look at the individual snapping features. So now there's only endpoint snapping turned on. So let's see what's an endpoint. Endpoint is of all the geometry, the edges for instance, an endpoint, also where a rounding begins or ends. There's an endpoint. There are many endpoints in the geometry you can snap. So the other next snap is near. This I never use typically because it snaps everywhere on an edge for instance, and this is very undefined, so I always have it turned off. Point snapping snaps to points. At the moment we don't have any points. We can create some points by using the point tool. Let's just create 3 points, and now select the line tool, and I can now snap to points. I can draw a line from one point to the other like this. Then midpoint. With midpoint snapping you snap to midpoints of objects, for instance to these two lines. We can draw a line from here to here, from midpoint to midpoint. Also of edges, you have midpoints. Yeah, this can be very useful to snap the midpoint here and the midpoint here and draw a line. A very useful snapping is snap to centers. For instance, we can snap to the center of this circle and snap to also the center of the gate pad. It's a good idea to hide the terminal layer, the termination layer. Now we see here a clear square object and we can snap to the center of it. We can also snap to here and then draw a line to the center of this radius. This can be useful to bond a wire from here to here. Yeah. Next snapping option is intersection. So we can snap to intersections. Also just this line touching this line is an intersection, you see. So also if we have this crossing, this is an intersection. It can snap to this. Also, when you draw a line just from somewhere and you are using orthogonal mode, then this restricts the direction, and this restricted direction will snap to the intersection with other objects. This is very useful. I often use this. As soon as you turn off orthogonal by holding the shift key, it will not snap. Intersection can be really very useful. Also very useful is perpendicular. Let's draw a line from here and we have to find a point here where it is perpendicular and then it will snap. Tangent I rarely use and the others I also rarely use. Okay, these are already all snapping options we have, or there are some more but not so relevant. Something very important is this one, project. If you enable this, the snapping behavior just changes. If you now snap to an endpoint, by the way, you can really enable at the same time many snaps. Sometimes you want to reduce it to be sure that you really use the correct snap. But now let's enable several, and here I just snap the endpoint here, and what you see it projects this point down to here because we have here the construction plane. So everything that you snap is projected to the construction plane, and then finally we have the line drawn on the construction plane. These can be useful if you want to work in 3D with different heights of chip and substrate surface. Typically you have turned it off and you snap to the 3D geometry, but sometimes it's also really useful. And of course you can change the location of your construction plane. Let's now do this. We can just click here, set construction plane origin. And very useful could be, for instance, if you set your construction plane origin to the center of, you see the snap is missing. You have to turn on the snap and maybe turn off the others. Now we snap the center of the circle, but the problem is now the snapped center is projected down. This we don't want. Let's turn off project. Now we snap really the center. And now construction plane is here. You don't see it. This is because we are in shaded mode and the objects, they are always in front of your grid. With wireframe, you see really there is now these new coordinates of the construction plane, coordinate systems, the axis. Very important to note is when you set the construction plane, by default, this is only set in the active view, perspective view, for instance here. When you go to the top view, we see the axes are still in the old place and not at our fiducial. Also in the other views, here it's still on the bottom of the base plate for all these views. This behavior you can change, and I always work with so-called universal construction planes. You go to Tools, Options, and it is under Modeling Aids. You find Standard Construction Planes. This is the default, and Universal Construction Planes. I always use this mode. Now the construction planes haven't changed, but the next time you update it, let's now do this. Let's again set the construction plane to the fiducial mark. Now here we didn't see anything, but in the other views now you see it's updated here. Now the axes go through your fiducial mark in the top view, also in the front view. Here it's the axis on the surface of your substrate, and here somewhere is your fiducial mark. So this is really great. You set the construction plane in one view, and in the other views it's updated as well. Okay. So that's almost everything. Yeah. So you have learned everything about snapping, what the snaps are, and that you have to make sure you do project or not project, depending on the situation, what you want to have, that you have your construction plane in the right place, and you can turn on and off some snapping features, some behavior. And best if you just practice a lot, just play around a little bit, and at the end every object we have created is just here. And let's now just delete this layer. You cannot delete the active layer, so typically you just activate the default layer and then select this layer and delete. So it asks you whether you want to delete because it has 16 objects. Yes, you have cleaned up again. Okay, thanks for watching, and next time finally we will create first bond wires. Hope to see you next time.